Marcus Chen had always believed that the universe spoke to those who listened carefully enough. On that bitter February morning in 2019, as he walked through the maze of cardboard shelters beneath the Manhattan Bridge, he heard it whisper his name through the wind that cut between the concrete pillars like a blade. The call had come in at 6:30 that morning. Another runaway, they said. 15 years old, been on the streets for 3 weeks. Marcus had worked as a social worker for the Department of Social Services for 8 years, and he'd heard variations of this story hundreds of times. But something about this particular case gnawed at him as he navigated through the makeshift community that had sprouted in the shadows of one of New York's most iconic structures. He found the boy huddled against a support beam, his slight frame dwarfed by an oversized army jacket that had seen better decades. The kid's face was partially hidden beneath a Yankees cap pulled low, but Marcus could see the telltale signs, the hollow cheeks, the way his eyes darted constantly, scanning for threats that might emerge from any direction. This was survival mode, and Marcus recognized it because he'd lived it himself once, a lifetime ago. "Danny," Marcus called softly, approaching with the measured calm he'd perfected over years of working with traumatized youth. "I'm Marcus Chen. I'm with Social Services. Your Aunt Maria has been worried sick about you." The boy's head snapped up, revealing eyes that held far too much knowledge for someone who should have been worrying about algebra tests and school dances. "She sent you?" Danny's voice cracked, betraying the fear beneath his defensive posture. Marcus nodded, settling onto a nearby crate to bring himself to eye level. "She did. She's been calling every day since you disappeared. She wants you to come home." "Home," Danny repeated the word like it was foreign on his tongue. "You mean the apartment where her boyfriend likes to use me as a punching bag when he's had too much to drink? That home?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, not because they were shocking, he'd heard worse, but because of the matter-of-fact way Danny delivered them. This kid had already learned to armor his pain and cynicism, a defense mechanism Marcus knew all too well. "Tell me about that," Marcus said simply. For the next hour, as the city woke up around them and the morning commute thundered overhead, Danny told his story. It was a familiar tale painted in heartbreaking detail. A mother who'd died of an overdose 2 years prior, a father who'd never been in the picture, and a reluctant aunt who'd taken him in more out of obligation than love. The boyfriend had arrived 6 months ago, bringing with him a hair-trigger temper and hands that were quick to strike when the mood hit him. "The last time he cracked 2 of my ribs," Danny said, unconsciously wrapping his arms around his torso. "Said it was my fault for leaving dishes in the sink. Maria just stood there and watched. Didn't say a word." Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his chest as he listened. He'd processed hundreds of cases like this, followed protocol, worked within the system. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But sitting there in that moment, watching this kid try to hold on to his dignity while living in conditions that would break most adults, Marcus realized that following protocol wasn't enough anymore. "Danny," he said carefully, "what if I told you there might be another option? Something different from going back to your aunt's place or getting lost in the foster system?" The boy's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Like what? You gonna adopt me yourself?" The question was meant to be sarcastic, but it hit Marcus with unexpected force. Why couldn't he? Not adoption necessarily, but something. Some kind of alternative that addressed the real problem. That kids like Danny fell through the cracks not because there weren't resources, but because the resources weren't designed with their specific needs in mind. Marcus spent the rest of that day thinking about Danny's words as he helped the boy navigate the intake process at a temporary youth shelter. By the time he returned to his cramped studio apartment in Queens that evening, an idea had begun to take shape in his mind. It was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible, but Marcus had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been done yet. That night, he called his sister Rebecca, a successful attorney who'd been trying to convince Marcus to leave social work for years. "I need to ask you something," he said without preamble when she answered. "What would it take to start a nonprofit organization?" Rebecca's silence stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke. "Marcus, please tell me you're not about to do something crazy." "Define crazy," You know exactly what I mean. You've got that tone in your voice, the same one you had when you decided to become a social worker instead of going to law school. The same one you had when you moved to New York with $300 in a duffel bag. Marcus smiled despite himself. Rebecca knew him too well. I want to create a residential program for homeless teenage boys, not a shelter, not a group home, something different, a place where they can stay as long as they need to, get an education, learn life skills, have some stability. Marcus, do you have any idea how much something like that would cost? The licensing requirements alone would be nightmare. And don't get me started on insurance, staffing, finding a suitable location. I know it sounds impossible, Marcus interrupted, but Beck, I met this kid today, and he's living under a bridge because the alternatives are worse. There are dozens like him, maybe hundreds. The system is failing them. Rebecca sighed, and Marcus could picture her rubbing her temples the way she did when she was processing complex legal problems. You're really serious about this? Dead serious. Then we need to talk. In person, this weekend. I'll drive up from Philadelphia, and we'll go through this properly. If you're going to tilt at windmills, we might as well make sure you don't get yourself killed in the process. That weekend marked the beginning of what would become the most challenging and rewarding period of Marcus's life. Rebecca arrived with a briefcase full of legal documents and a laptop loaded with nonprofit regulations. They spent Saturday morning at Marcus's kitchen table, mapping out the legal framework for what they decided to call Haven House. The name's good, Rebecca admitted as she reviewed Marcus's hastily scribbled mission statement. Simple, clear, evokes safety without being patronizing. But Marcus, the reality of what you're proposing is staggering. You're talking about residential care, which means 24/7 staffing. You need licensed social workers, counselors, educational support, medical care coordination. The liability insurance alone will cost more than you make in a year. Marcus stared at the growing list of requirements and felt his dream beginning to crumble under the weight of practical reality. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's too much. Rebecca closed her laptop and looked at her brother with the expression she'd worn since they were children. The one that said she was about to tell him something he needed to hear, whether he wanted to or not. Marcus, do you remember what you told me when I was going through my divorce? When I was convinced my life was over and I'd never be happy again? I told you that the biggest mistakes people make are the chances they don't take. Exactly. And now you're sitting here ready to give up on something that could change kids' lives because it's hard? That's not the brother I know. Rebecca spent the rest of the weekend helping Marcus develop a preliminary business plan. They researched similar programs across the country, studied successful models, and began to understand the scope of what they were attempting. By Sunday evening, they had the skeleton of a plan that was ambitious but not entirely insane. Visits. Not just mine, all of us. You showed us that someone cared enough to fight for us. The next few months blurred together in a haze of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. Marcus continued his day job while spending every free moment working on Haven House. He met with city officials, toured potential locations, and reached out to other nonprofits to understand the landscape better. The breakthrough came in May during a meeting with Patricia Williams, a program director at a large Manhattan charity who'd been recommended by a colleague. Patricia was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything the city could throw at someone. She listened to Marcus's presentation with the kind of focused attention that made him feel like he was being evaluated by a very patient but thorough judge. When he finished, Patricia leaned back in her chair and studied him for a long moment. Mr. Chen, I've been in this business for 35 years. I've seen a lot of well-meaning people come through my office with big dreams and bigger hearts. Most of them burn out within 2 years. Marcus felt his stomach drop. But every once in a while, someone walks in here who understands that good intentions aren't enough. Someone who's done their homework, who understands the complexities and is still willing to do the work. You might be one of those people. Patricia's organization, it turned out, had been looking for a partner to launch exactly the kind of program Marcus envisioned. They had funding, experience, and most importantly, a building, a former YMCA in Brooklyn that had been sitting empty for 3 years. It needs work, Patricia warned as she handed Marcus the keys for a site visit. Lots of work, but the bones are good, and it's already zoned for residential use. The building was a revelation. Built in the 1920s, it retained the solid construction and thoughtful design of its era. The main floor held a large common area with soaring ceilings, a commercial kitchen, and several smaller rooms that could serve as offices or meeting spaces. The second floor contained a dozen bedrooms, each designed to house 2 residents, with shared bathrooms and a large study area. The third floor had been used for recreation and could be converted into additional programming space. Standing in the main hall, Marcus could envision it all. Teenagers doing homework at the study tables, pick-up basketball games in the gym, family-style dinners in the dining area. For the first time since that February morning when he'd met Danny, the dream felt tangible. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of renovation, licensing, and staff recruitment. Marcus took a leave of absence from his regular job, pouring himself entirely into getting Haven House ready. Rebecca helped navigate the legal requirements while Patricia provided crucial guidance on operational issues. They hired Sarah Martinez, a former teacher turned youth counselor, as the program director. Sarah brought a warmth and competence that complemented Marcus's vision perfectly. Together, they developed curricula that would address not just housing and basic needs, but education, life skills, mental health support, and job training. The renovation was a community effort that surprised Marcus with its scope. Word spread through the social services network, and volunteers began appearing. Contractors who donated labor, teachers who offered tutoring services, local businesses that provided supplies. Even Danny, who had been placed in a stable foster home but kept in touch with Marcus, showed up on weekends to help paint bedrooms. "This is really happening," Danny said one Saturday afternoon as they worked side by side, rolling soft blue paint onto the walls of what would become the house library. "I can't believe you actually did it." Marcus paused in his painting to look around the room. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny possibilities. "We're not done yet. This is just the beginning." Haven House officially opened in January 2020, almost exactly 1 year after Marcus's first meeting with Danny. Their first resident was a 16-year-old named Jamal, who'd been living in subway tunnels for 6 months after aging out of a group home. He arrived with everything he owned in a garbage bag and a defensive attitude that Marcus recognized immediately. "How long can I stay?" Jamal asked during his intake interview, the question loaded with the expectation of disappointment. "As long as you need to," Marcus replied. "Our program is designed to be flexible. Some guys might need a few months to get back on their feet. Others might stay through high school graduation. We'll figure it out together." Over the following weeks, more boys arrived. There was Kevin, 14, whose mother had kicked him out when she discovered he was gay. Miguel, 17, who'd been supporting his younger siblings by dealing drugs until a rival gang put a target on his back. Alex, 15, whose foster family had given up on him after his third arrest for shoplifting food. Each boy brought his own story, his own trauma, his own dreams. Marcus and Sarah worked to create an environment that honored their experiences while providing the structure and support they needed to heal and grow. House meetings became forums for problem-solving and conflict resolution. Family-style dinners provided opportunities for connection and conversation. The study hall buzzed with activity as residents worked toward their high school diplomas with the help of volunteer tutors. The program wasn't without its challenges. There were fights, relapses, and moments when Marcus wondered if he was making any real difference. The city's bureaucracy seemed designed to create obstacles, funding was always tight, and the emotional toll of working with deeply traumatized young people was sometimes overwhelming. The pandemic hit just as Haven House was finding its rhythm. Suddenly, the communal spaces that had fostered connection became potential vectors for disease transmission. The boys couldn't attend in-person school or participate in the job training programs they'd been enrolled in. Everyone was stuck inside, and tensions ran high. Marcus found himself working 18-hour days, trying to keep both the residents and staff safe while maintaining some semblance of the programming that made Haven House more than just another place to sleep. They pivoted to virtual learning, created new recreational activities that could be done safely, and instituted mental health check-ins that helped identify and address problems before they escalated. It was during this period that Marcus truly understood the impact of what they'd created. When the rest of the world shut down and people retreated to their homes, the boys at Haven House had something that many of them had never experienced before: a stable, safe place to weather the storm. They weren't bouncing between shelters or sleeping rough. They had their own beds, regular meals, and adults who cared about their well-being. One evening in April 2020, as Marcus was finishing up some paperwork in his office, he heard laughter coming from the common area. Curious, he went to investigate and found 6 of the residents playing a board game around one of the large tables. They were joking with each other, engaging in the kind of good-natured trash talk that spoke to genuine friendship. Jamal noticed Marcus watching and called out, "Mr. Chen, want to play? Miguel's been cheating all night, and we need someone with integrity to keep him honest." "I don't cheat," Miguel protested with mock indignation. "I just have superior strategic thinking skills." Marcus joined the game, and for the next hour, he simply enjoyed being present with these young men who had come to him broken and were slowly, steadily putting themselves back together. They teased him mercilessly about his terrible dice luck and included him in their conversations about everything from sports to philosophy to their plans for the future. Later, as Marcus locked up the building for the night, he reflected on how far they'd all come. Haven House now had a waiting list of boys who needed their services. The program had received recognition from the mayor's office and several national youth advocacy organizations. More importantly, they had a track record of success. Graduates who'd gone on to college, trade school, stable employment, healthy relationships. Danny, who had become something of an unofficial ambassador for the program, stopped by regularly to visit and help with new residents. He was thriving in his foster placement and had been accepted to several colleges with plans to study social work himself. "You changed my life," he told Marcus during one of these. Marcus smiled, thinking about the long journey from that February morning under the bridge to this moment. "You changed mine too, Danny. All of you did. You taught me that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to accept that things have to stay the way they are." As Haven House approached its 3rd anniversary, Marcus often found himself thinking about the ripple effects of their work. Each boy who passed through their doors carried with him not just practical skills and emotional healing, but also a new understanding of his own worth and potential. Many of them spoke about wanting to help other kids who were facing similar challenges. The program had evolved and expanded beyond Marcus's original vision. They now offered mentorship programs that paired current residents with successful graduates. They had partnerships with local colleges and trade schools that provided pathways to further education. A job training component helped residents develop practical skills while earning money to save for their futures. Perhaps most importantly, Haven House had become a model that other cities were beginning to replicate. Marcus regularly fielded calls from social workers, advocates, and government officials who wanted to understand how they could create similar programs in their communities. Standing in the main hall on a recent evening, watching the boys who now called Haven House home, Marcus marveled at the twists and turns that had led him to this moment. He'd started his career thinking that success meant helping individual clients navigate existing systems. He'd never imagined that he would end up creating an entirely new system, one that had touched hundreds of lives and would continue to do so long after he was gone. The work was far from over. There were still too many kids sleeping rough, too many boys falling through the cracks of systems that weren't designed to catch them. But Haven House had proven that change was possible, that with enough determination, creativity, and support, even the most entrenched problems could be addressed. As Marcus turned off the lights and headed home to his apartment, he carried with him the sounds of the evening, homework being discussed over dinner, video games being played in the recreation room, quiet conversations between roommates as they settled in for the night. These were the sounds of safety, of belonging, of young men who were learning to believe in themselves and their futures. The universe had whispered his name that February morning, 3 years ago, calling him to something larger than himself. In answering that call, Marcus had discovered not just his life's work, but a truth that sustained him through the most challenging moments. That sometimes the most profound change begins with a single person who refuses to walk past suffering and instead asks, "What if there was another way?" Haven House stood as testament to the power of that question and to the extraordinary things that become possible when someone decides that impossible is just another word for something that hasn't been done yet. In the end, Marcus had learned the universe doesn't just whisper to those who listen, it sings through those who have the courage to act on what they hear.